No, I said, closing my laptop. The word cut sharper than their rejection. My name is Bertha Carter, 29 years old, and I'll never forget that family dinner in Austin. That night, they called my dream a gamble. 3 months later, they gambled $725,000 on Vanessa's fantasy. She lost it all. The BMW vanished, and my parents drowned in debt. Now they've come back, asking me to sell my condo to save them. But I have only one answer. I am not this family's backup plan. Before we continue, have you ever been treated as invisible in your own family? Tell me in the comments, and let me know where you're listening from. I grew up in Austin, Texas, in a red brick house. Neighbors thought we were perfect. 2 daughters, success, comfort. Inside, I knew better. From the start, I was the diligent one. Straight A's, certificates, teachers praising me. At home? Silence. One evening, I showed my father a report card. All A's, Dad. He glanced, unmoved. You should have done this anyway, Bertha. But when Vanessa twirled in her tutu, look at our star, my mother cried, clapping. The cameras flashed, the room filled with pride. At 16, I asked quietly, Dad, can I have a car? Just an old one, for school. He lowered his paper. Too much money, you're capable without it. Weeks later, balloons filled our backyard. Happy birthday, Vanessa, they shouted. A brand new car gleamed under the lights. The crowd cheered. Once I begged for $500 for a coding camp. Waste of money, my mother said. The next month, she gushed. Vanessa's going to New York. 12,000, but worth it. Even when I won first place in science, I ran home holding my certificate. Mom, look! She barely glanced. That's nice. Now see Vanessa's costume. Isn't she beautiful? I stood in silence. Certificate buried under magazines. Applause saved for her. By then, I had learned the rule. Vanessa was celebrated. I was expected. And the scar it left was cruel. Being useful was never the same as being loved. If they ignored me then, why would they believe me now? When I got into Stanford, I thought things would change. It was the biggest achievement of my life. Partial scholarship, a dream in my hands. I remember clutching that acceptance letter, tears streaming down. But at home, my father only said, Good, but tuition is still too high. Can you handle it? My mother turned to Vanessa. Sweetheart, how's your ballet rehearsal going? The joy stayed mine alone. At Stanford, reality hit fast. Rent in Palo Alto, books, food. Even with scholarship, I couldn't survive without work. Days in lecture halls, nights behind the library desk, weekends at the IT lab. I lived on instant noodles, my eyes burning from lack of sleep. Sometimes I sat on a crowded bus, pressed against strangers, clutching heavy textbooks. The Texas heat seemed easier than the Bay Area cold, seeping through my thin jacket in winter. Other nights I fell asleep at my keyboard. I woke with letters imprinted on my cheek, my hair tangled, ramen cups still half-eaten beside me. When I called home, I hoped for encouragement. Instead, my mother's voice sparkled with pride. Vanessa's studying acting in New York. Her teachers adore her. I whispered, That's nice, while staring at unpaid bills. Once I tried to share. Mom, I became a teaching assistant. Silence. Then she changed the subject. Your sister might get a role on stage. Every word cut deeper than silence. I stretched every dollar, skipped meals, patched my shoes when they tore. No one noticed. But that solitude became my weapon. Every long night coding in the library was a brick in my foundation. Every no from home hardened into resolve. I told myself, if no one believes in you, Bertha, then you must. After graduation, I landed at a Palo Alto startup. Fast pace, sleepless culture, but I thrived. Within a year, I led a small team. For the first time, my badge carried weight. Yet, even then, family calls only brought comparisons. Vanessa is so talented, they repeated. Not once, we're proud of you. So I built in silence, saved every dollar, bought a modest condo in San Jose. That key in my hand was proof. I could build a life without their approval. At night, in that small condo, I opened my laptop and began sketching build flow. A vision, a tool, something that could change an industry. And I whispered to myself, they'll never see it coming. They ignored my fire, but silence was only making it stronger. The chandelier hummed while my future was dismissed at dinner. I opened my laptop, hands steady, heart loud. I need 70,000 to scale build flow, I began. 8 companies committed, demo ready. First year revenue projected 300,000. My father didn't glance at the slides. You already have stability. Why gamble your life? My mother sighed, eyes soft but final. Freedom sounds like debt. Don't chase trouble, Bertha. I pressed on. This is real market pain, not a fantasy. They stared through me like I was noise. Vanessa swirled her wine, smiling. Not everyone's meant to be a CEO, sis. Some people are better in support roles. Her words landed clean and cruel. I closed the laptop, breath shaking but controlled. I hear you, I said. I'll handle it alone. My father's palm cut the air. Don't be dramatic. We're protecting you from failure. My mother added. You're strong. Vanessa's fragile. She needs a lift. Fragile lodged in my chest like glass. That night I lay under the cracked ceiling. Every label replayed. Fragile, support, failure. 16 again, watching her unwrap a car. Me, sweating on buses in August heat. My science trophy buried under magazines. I whispered to the dark. They won't see me, so I'll make something they can't ignore. Weeks later, the phone rang with polished excitement. Vanessa's launching in Dallas, my mother announced. A luxury events company. She has vision. Vision without numbers, without clients, without plan. Papers moved fast. A bank loan materialized. $725,000 signed in a week. A BMW with a red bow in their driveway. Designer suits. A glassy office. Champagne photos online. I dialed my father, voice low. You refused $70,000 with contracts waiting. Now you borrow $725 for branding? He exhaled hard. Don't compare apples, Bertha. Your sister needs belief. You'll be fine. I looked at my mortgaged condo keys. These keys had teeth. They bought every sleepless night. Their belief was ornamental. Mine paid the bills. I turned off the phone and stared at the window. Austin's cicadas screamed. The house felt colder than winter. Hurt burned down to something brighter. Decision. If they wouldn't back my proof, I'd outgrow their doubt. If they crowned illusion, I'd let results dethrone it. I kept a ledger of slights, debts I owed only myself. Tomorrow I'd code, call, and climb. Quietly, relentlessly, without permission. They chose their golden gamble. I chose reality, grit, and time. They called me risky, then gambled everything on her illusion. I left Austin with my chest burning. But anger quickly turned into clarity. If they would not see my worth, I would make them blind with proof. Back in San Jose, I walked into my condo, dropped my suitcase, and opened my laptop. The plan was no longer a pitch for approval. It was my war map. I took a personal loan, stacking it on top of every dollar I had saved. When I signed the papers, the banker asked, "Are you sure you want to risk your home?" I answered, steady. I already risked everything the moment I dreamed. BuildFlow was born in a room with peeling paint and secondhand chairs. Miguel, a kid fresh out of college, coded beside me. Rachel handled client calls with a voice louder than doubt. We weren't glamorous. We were exhausted. But we were alive. One night, at 2 a.m, I stared at the dwindling balance in our account. I nearly gave up. Then I remembered Vanessa's smirk across that dinner table. Her words played in my head like poison. Not everyone is cut out to be an entrepreneur, sis. That blade twisted in my chest again, and became fuel. By the 4th month, when our first major client signed a $50,000 contract, I cried. Not delicate tears. Violent sobs, shaking in the corner of that dingy office. Rachel brought pizza. Miguel lifted his slice like a toast. To proving them wrong, he grinned. Word spread. 1 contract became 5. 5 became 30. By the 2nd year, BuildFlow cleared over $500,000 in revenue. Construction crews across California logged in every morning to a tool born out of my rejection. Meanwhile, whispers from Austin reached me. Vanessa's company was crumbling. The BMW repossessed. The luxury office locked. My parents drowning in loan interest. Then, late one night, my phone lit up with their number. I answered. "Bertha," my father said, voice strained. "The house. The bank is coming. We need 100,000. I froze. My mother added through tears. "Please, you're successful now. Help us. Sell the condo if you must." The condo. The place I had mortgaged, nearly lost, to build everything. I clenched the phone so tight it hurt. And for the first time I felt no fear, only resolve. "I won't," I said coldly. "Not this time." In that silence, I finally understood. I was no longer the daughter begging for scraps of faith. I was the one holding power now. Their collapse was not my burden. Their lessons, not mine to repeat. And that was the moment the roles reversed. 6 months passed since I shut the door on my family. Life in San Jose turned quiet, almost foreign without their calls. No more guilt-filled pleas, no late-night messages demanding sacrifice. For the first time, my days were mine alone. BuildFlow grew beyond what I once dared imagine. We signed major contracts, expanding across California construction sites. The office buzzed with energy, my team thriving alongside me. Each milestone proved one thing. I had built this life. At home, I allowed myself small luxuries. Coffee in the garden, mornings tending roses, evenings reading under warm lamplight. For years, survival had consumed me. Now I could breathe. I noticed simple joys returning like shy birds at dawn. Sometimes, strangers reached out after hearing my story. They saw hope in my struggle, proof that rejection isn't final. I realized my journey was never just for me. It was a reminder that silence and scars can still bloom strength. I told them healing is slow, but it always moves forward. Yet echoes of Austin lingered. The imbalance, the favoritism, the endless chase for approval that never came. Those wounds shaped me, but they no longer defined me. I wasn't their overlooked daughter anymore. I was Bertha Carter. Looking back, I understood the hardest truth. Family isn't always who shares your blood. Sometimes it's the people who see you, value you, and walk beside you through storms. So I chose boundaries over guilt, peace over chaos, self-respect over sacrifice. And in that choice, I found freedom. If you've ever faced this kind of betrayal, know this, you are not alone. Tell me where you're listening from and how you're healing. And if this story mirrors yours, speak it into daylight. Let courage turn scars into blueprints tomorrow. I built my own life, and I will never apologize for it.
The valet barely looked at me as he took my keys. Maybe it was the modest sedan, or maybe just the way I clutched the gift like it was something breakable. Either way, I didn't belong. Not here, not tonight. The entrance to the Fairmount Hotel's grand ballroom shimmered with fairy lights, and guests swept past me in tailored suits and sequined dresses. I stood for a moment at the edge of it all, watching a woman with gold heels carry a toddler wearing a monogrammed velvet blazer. Jonas liked dinosaurs, not monograms. I adjusted the bow on the wrapped box in my hands, remote-controlled helicopter bright green. I'd researched for weeks and saved for months. 10 years old deserved something special. But as I stepped forward, a hand rose. "Sorry, ma'am," the security guard said, blocking my path. "Private event. Family only." "I am family." I said, my voice quieter than I intended. "My name's Nadine Harlow. That's my nephew's birthday party." He hesitated, glanced at his clipboard. "You're not on the list." That's when I saw her Vivian appearing in the archway like she'd been summoned by the tension. Her dress was flawless, a soft lilac that cost more than my entire grocery budget last month. Her smile was effortless and fake. "Nadine," she said, tilting her head like she'd just remembered I existed. "What are you doing here?" I blinked. "I'm here for Jonas, his birthday." Vivian's smile didn't waver. "Didn't Mom tell you?" "We decided to keep it small this year, just immediate family." Behind her, a string quartet played something elegant. Waiters in black jackets carried champagne flutes on silver trays. The guest list had to be over 300. "Small," I echoed. She touched my arm like she was offering comfort. "You understand." I didn't. But I nodded anyway, because that's what I always did. I looked past her into the ballroom. I saw my parents laughing near the cake table. I saw the world I thought I belonged to. And then I turned around and walked back to the parking lot, the gift still in my hands. I didn't cry. Not then. Instead, I sat in my car for a long time, watching the hotel's lights blur through the windshield. Then I reached for my phone, scrolled to one number, and pressed call. The ballroom windows glowed gold against the evening sky. From where I sat, I could see silhouettes dancing. Vivian twirling in heels, my parents swaying near the cake. I pressed my forehead to the steering wheel and let out a breath I didn't realize I was holding. 7 years ago, when they sold the house on Redfern Avenue, I was the one who co-signed their mortgage application. Mom said they didn't want to burden Vivian. She was still getting on her feet after grad school. I didn't ask why Vivian's grad school somehow involved a photography retreat in Santorini. Later, I covered her remaining student loans. It was only $18,000, and Mom cried when I wrote the check. "You're such a blessing, Nadine," she said, pressing her hand over mine. "Vivian just needs a little room to breathe." Then came Jonas's summer camp. Just until her reimbursement check clears, Dad promised. That reimbursement never came. I paid again the next year. And the next. I used to think keeping quiet made me strong. that giving without strings was how I proved I mattered. Tonight, they proved I didn't. I sat back watching as a delivery van pulled up stacked high with catering trays. Another reminder that no one inside was starving for anything. I unlocked my phone fingers, steady now. My thumb hovered over Toby's name for just a second. Then I tapped. "Hey, Nadine," he answered on the second ring voice, warm and familiar. "Everything all right?" "No," I said calmly. "I need you to freeze every account that's tied to my name. Joint co-signed authorized everything. Now." There was a pause. Then, "You sure I've never been more sure?" He didn't question me after that, just started typing. As the call ended, I looked back at the hotel one last time. The celebration was still going, the music still soft and elegant, the people still laughing like nothing had cracked beneath the surface. But something had. I placed the untouched gift on the passenger seat, folded my hands in my lap, and waited. I didn't know for what, only that something had just shifted in me. And this time, I wasn't letting it pass. It started small, like most disappearances do. A canceled movie night here, a rescheduled museum trip there. Jonas has soccer. He's got a group project. He's just so tired after school. At first, I believed it. I didn't want to be the clingy aunt. I told myself he'd call next week. I left voicemails, sent care packages. I waited. Fridays used to be ours. I'd pick him up, we'd split a cherry slush at that corner shop by the school. He'd tell me which dinosaur was the fastest, the scariest, the most misunderstood. That boy loved to talk until one day he didn't. Now I couldn't remember the last time I'd heard his voice without a buffer. Every call was rushed, Vivian hovering in the background. Say hi to Auntie Nadine, click, end of conversation. After the party, something gnawed at me louder than the silence between us. I logged into my online banking portal and began checking linked accounts. What started as curiosity turned into nausea. There were 3 credit cards I'd forgotten even existed, cards I'd opened years ago to help build Vivian's credit. All still active. All recently used. One had a $3,000 charge from a boutique hotel in Napa. Another showed monthly payments to a luxury gym. The third, a home decor retailer with prices high enough to make me blink twice. Then I found the loan. A personal line opened 2 years ago using my name as co-signer. $42,000 and climbing. It didn't make sense. I hadn't seen any of this. No alerts, no requests. But then I remembered the forwarded mail the time Vivian offered to handle the paperwork for Mom's insurance renewal the way she insisted on helping me simplify my accounts. My generosity had been converted into collateral, my silence into access. She didn't just cut me out, she replaced me with a signature. I stared at the spreadsheet I'd started building, itemizing every transaction, every login I hadn't made. The numbers didn't lie, and neither did the dates. My trust wasn't just misplaced, it had been monetized. I picked up my phone again. This time it wasn't Toby I needed to call. It was Claire. By morning I had 11 missed calls, 8 from Vivian, 2 from my mother, and 1 from a number I didn't recognize but could guess. I let everyone go to voicemail. My coffee had already gone cold by the time my phone rang again, and this time I picked up. "What the hell is wrong with you?" Vivian didn't wait for a greeting. Her voice was shrill-edged with panic. "Do you realize what you've done? You embarrassed me in front of everyone. My cards were declined. The caterer threatened to call the cops." I kept my tone flat. "Sounds like a memorable party." "Don't play coy, Nadine. This was Jonas's day. And you ruined it." "I wasn't invited, remember," I said, standing at the kitchen counter. "Apparently I'm not close enough family to stand in the same room. But I was close enough to bankroll it." Vivian went silent for a beat. Then, "You've always been dramatic, and you've always been entitled. You're going to destroy this family over money." "No," I said calmly. "You already did that when you started treating me like a credit line instead of a person." Another pause. "We needed help. You forged my name." "We didn't forge anything. I have bank records, Vivian. I have dates, signatures, charges, accounts. You used my identity to take out loans and open cards you never intended to pay off." She didn't deny it. I took a breath. Now you know what it feels like to be erased. The line went dead. I didn't feel vindicated. Not yet. I wasn't after vengeance. I was after a boundary one that should have existed years ago. I reached for the folder I'd started the night before, the one filled with statements, screenshots, and emails. Then I pulled out the business card I hadn't used since Dad's first heart scare 5 years ago. Claire Devlin, family law. She picked up on the second ring. Nadine. Been a while. I need your help, I said. How bad is it? 87,000 and counting. And I want it back. Claire didn't gasp. She didn't offer sympathy. She just said, come in tomorrow. Bring everything. After I hung up, I returned to the table and slid the gift for Jonas back into the closet. Not because he didn't deserve it, but because the next time I gave him something, it was going to be on my terms. Claire didn't blink as she flipped through the folders. Page after page, transaction after transaction. Every signature, every login timestamp, every line of credit attached to my name, but never touched by my hands. She's good, Claire said flatly, tapping one of the forged authorization forms. But not good enough. The handwriting doesn't match your legal signature. Not even close. She laid out a clean sheet of paper. So here's what we do. Demand letter. Full restitution principal and interest. Legal fees. Termination of all joint or co-signed financial ties. And something else. I looked up. Visitation, Claire said. With Jonas. We'll file for court-protected access if they try to block you again. I exhaled slowly. That's all I want. No, Claire said, looking me square in the eyes. It's not all you want, but it's what you'll ask for. The rest will come. By the time I left her office, the letter was in motion. Certified mail signature required. Vivian wouldn't be able to pretend she hadn't received it. Later that evening, I got the call I'd been expecting. Not from Vivian this time, but from my father. Your mother's upset, he said, voice heavy with disappointment. She thinks you're being unfair. She hasn't said a word to me. She's hurt. So am I. He sighed. Families fight. It's not worth dragging lawyers into it. You could have just talked to Vivian. I did, I said. She lied. He was quiet a long time. Maybe you should have just let it go. I didn't flinch. Not this time. Let it go. Like she did with my name. My money. My place in this family. She's your sister. She used that word like a shield. I could hear him shift in his chair. It's not too late to call it off. We'll figure something out as a family. No, Dad. You had your chance to figure it out. He didn't say anything after that. Just a sigh, and then the line clicked. I stood there in the middle of my kitchen holding the phone like it might ring again. But it didn't, and I didn't expect it to. I sat back at the table, opened the folder one more time, and slid in the printed copy of the demand letter. This wasn't just paper. It was evidence that I finally believed myself. The house looked bigger than I remembered. Maybe it was the new landscaping or the freshly painted shutters. Or maybe it was just that now I could finally see how much of myself had been poured into a place I'd never been fully welcomed. I rang the doorbell. Once. Then twice. The chime echoed like I was a visitor, not someone whose name was on the original loan. Vivian opened the door with a polished smile that cracked at the edges. Well, if it isn't the sheriff herself. I stepped inside without responding. The foyer smelled like citrus cleaner and expensive perfume. My parents were already seated in the living room, stiff on the couch, like they didn't know which side they were supposed to be on. Margaret offered a half smile. Elliot wouldn't look at me. Vivian folded her arms. You didn't need to do all this. We could have talked. We tried that. You lied. So now I brought evidence. I laid the folder on the coffee table. Page 1, the forged authorization form. Page 2, the loan application you claimed I signed. Page 3 through 10, credit card statements you racked up on my name. Vivian glanced down, scoffed. You act like you're some kind of martyr. You gave that money willingly. No, I gave it under the belief I was helping my family. You turned that into a financing plan for your fantasy life. You weren't generous, she snapped. You were foolish. I met her eyes. No, I was family. And you failed me. Elliot finally looked up, eyes clouded. "Vivian, did you really use her credit?" Vivian didn't answer. Margaret reached for her hand, but she pulled away. I took a breath and straightened the stack of papers. "You can call me foolish. You can call me dramatic. But today, you're going to call me done. You're going to ruin everything over some money. You already ruined it. I'm just putting my name back where it belongs." I turned to go. No one stopped me, not even my mother. On my way out, I passed the family photo hanging by the front door. My face wasn't in it. They'd updated it last year. New outfits, new smiles, new frame. I hadn't noticed I was missing until now. I closed the door behind me without a word and drove straight to Claire's office. Vivian's lawyer opened with bluster. Claims of emotional distress, character defamation, and irreparable harm to her family unit. Claire listened without interrupting, then calmly slid 2 folders across the table. "These are credit applications using my client's name, forged signatures, and over $87,000 in unauthorized debt," she said. "If you'd like to proceed with countersuit, we'll respond with charges of financial fraud, identity theft, and potential elder abuse." The silence on their side of the room was immediate. By the end of the week, the judge had issued orders freezing all remaining lines of credit Vivian had access to, including the ones she hadn't disclosed. Claire found them. She always did. The part no one expected was what came next. The court had requested a full financial assessment of Vivian's household to evaluate Jonas's stability. Receipts, statements, proof of expenses. Vivian submitted salon bills, a luxury spa membership, and a lease for a car that cost more than my entire annual salary. What she didn't provide was a single invoice for Jonas's school clothes or care. 3 days later, I got a call from the court-appointed evaluator. Temporary custody would be transferred to me until further review. Jonas arrived at my door with a small backpack and wide eyes. He didn't ask questions. He just walked in, kicked off his shoes, and opened the fridge like he used to. My parents came by that evening, not to help, to object. "This is going too far," Margaret said, arms crossed at the threshold. "Vivian's your sister." "She's his mother," Elliot added. "You're punishing a child to make a point." I stepped outside and closed the door behind me, keeping Jonas out of earshot. "No," I said quietly. "I'm protecting a child from someone who only sees him as an accessory." "You think you're better than us now?" Margaret asked, her voice cracking. "No," I said. "I think I finally see the difference between showing up and being visible." They didn't answer. I didn't invite them in. As they walked away, I looked back through the front window and saw Jonas on the couch, curled up with the old dinosaur blanket I'd saved from when he was little. He looked safe. The girl who used to beg to be included was gone, and in her place, someone new was beginning to build. We set up early 2 folding tables, a rented canopy, and a cooler full of juice boxes. Claire dropped off balloons. My neighbor brought extra lawn chairs, no catering vans, no champagne fountains, just peanut butter sandwiches shaped like dinosaurs and a homemade banner that read, "Jonas turns 11. The kids didn't care that the cake was from a grocery store or that the party bags weren't monogrammed. They chased each other through the grass, sticky with frosting cheeks flushed from laughter. I sat on a picnic blanket watching it all unfold, feeling something settle in me, something solid. When Jonas finally opened his gift, his eyes went wide. "The green one," he asked, holding up the exact helicopter he'd pointed to in a catalog months ago. "You remembered?" "Of course I did." He threw his arms around me tight. This was the best birthday ever. I blinked hard, pressing my nose into his hair before he pulled away. Later, while we packed up the folding chairs, I noticed an envelope tucked into the gift bag I'd set aside. A check from Damon, signed with a note to help with party expenses. I stood there a moment, then slipped the check into my pocket unopened. That night I mailed it back. No note, just silence. Because this time it wasn't about proving anything. It wasn't about making anyone proud or being seen. It was about Jonas. And it was about building something that didn't need chandeliers or RSVPs to feel real. As I wiped icing from the picnic table and watched him chase bubbles with the other kids I knew, this wasn't the kind of birthday people bragged about on Instagram, but it was honest. This time it was built with truth, and for the first time in a long time, so was I. Claire hosted us in her office on a rainy Saturday morning. Just 4 women and a pot of lukewarm coffee. No drama, no press, no one taking notes, just space to breathe. Ruth had been financially drained by her adult son's business ventures. Elena had co-signed for a niece's education loan that turned into 3 credit cards and 2 eviction notices. We shared stories like stitching old seams slowly, carefully, without shame. I kept thinking if I gave enough, Ruth said they'd finally see me as more than what I gave. I nodded, knowing that ache. But they didn't, Elena added, until I stopped giving. We weren't bitter. We weren't broken. We were just done being erased. Jonas now came every other weekend, legally guaranteed. He brought his favorite cereal and left socks in my dryer. We baked, we played cards, we didn't talk about his mother unless he brought her up. He rarely did. Vivian moved to Tennessee. She filed one last complaint, which the court denied, then disappeared into silence. Every few months I'd get a vague update, new apartment, new job, still bitter. That last part never changed. But today I was barefoot in the yard, sipping tea while Jonas ran full speed across the grass, his laughter rising like it used to when he was small. We're not rebuilding the old version, I said aloud, mostly to myself. We're starting something better. Not perfect, not polished, but better. Because sometimes the legacy you inherit isn't love, it's silence. And sometimes the most powerful legacy you leave is boundaries. The envelope was thick and cream-colored with raised lettering that spelled out Thorne and Vale attorneys at law. My name sat just below in black ink, Miss Irina Reyes, in a font too elegant to belong to anything casual. I held it for a moment before opening it, already knowing what it was. Not because anyone had told me, but because I'd felt something shift the morning Grandpa passed, like the hinge on an old door finally giving way. At breakfast, my mother had said it with her usual clipped certainty, Grayson's will is being read next week. It's formal, of course, but Selena is the primary beneficiary. You don't need to dress up for disappointment. I didn't respond. I'd learned a long time ago that arguing with her was like tossing words down a well. They never echoed back. The letter confirmed what she said. There would be a reading. Attendance was requested. I ran my finger over the date and time. One line stood out, "You have been named among the interested parties." I set the letter down beside my coffee steam, curling quietly between the lines. I could already hear my father's voice in my head. Don't embarrass yourself by showing up for something you were never part of. They never meant to be cruel, at least not directly. But sometimes the absence of belief stings sharper than any insult. I wasn't the star. I wasn't Selena. I had never been. And yet, I thought about Grandpa's porch, about the way he'd once placed an old book in my lap and said, "The ones who sit with you in silence, those are the ones who stay." It wasn't about inheritance, not really. I didn't expect money or recognition or even acknowledgement. But still, I folded the letter neatly, placed it into my coat pocket, and circled the date on my calendar. Maybe I wasn't supposed to matter in the room, but I was going to be in it. When we were kids, Selena's name echoed through every hallway in our house like it was stitched into the wallpaper. Selena got first chair in orchestra. Selena's teacher says she's gifted. Selena's audition went perfectly. Our parents talked about her like she was already someone important, as if everything she touched turned to something shiny and valuable. I never resented her, not really. I just learned to live in the spaces between her spotlight. While she stood on stages and posed for pictures, I found quiet corners, the back steps with a book, the garage with Grandpa's old puzzle boxes. Our mother once caught me reading at the dinner table and said, "Why don't you try joining the world for once?" I did. But it never stuck. I wasn't loud enough, not impressive enough, not Selena enough. Grandpa was the only one who didn't ask me to be louder. He'd pass me small gifts, an old pocket compass, a cracked globe, a map of trails he never got around to hiking. "See where this takes you," he'd say, and I'd spend afternoons tracing lines through places I'd never been feeling like. Maybe he understood the way my mind wandered. He never said I was special. He never had to. The last time I saw him was a Sunday in early October. I brought him a tin of tea I'd found in a little shop downtown, the kind with bergamot and dried orange peel. He made 2 mugs without asking what I wanted. We sat on his porch while the leaves blew across the yard, both of us quiet in that easy way people can be when nothing needs to be fixed. No one knew about that visit. There were no photos, no announcements. He didn't tell me about the will. He didn't tell me anything at all, really. But as I left, he squeezed my hand and said, "You always show up without needing to be seen. That's rarer than you think." It stayed with me. Not because it was praise, but because it felt like permission. Permission to keep showing up the way I was, even if no one else noticed. Now, as I laid out a plain black dress across my bed and packed a coat with missing buttons, I didn't feel prepared or important. I didn't feel like an heir to anything, but something deeper nudged at me. Not entitlement, just a quiet sense that I needed to be in that room. Not for them. Not even for me. For him. The chapel sat at the top of a small hill, its stone walls soaked in early frost. I arrived just before the service started in a plain wool coat that still held the scent of cedar from my closet. The wind bit at my hands as I stepped inside, shaking the cold from my sleeves. Selena was already there wrapped in sleek black silk, her heels impossibly high for winter. People moved around her like she was the widow instead of the granddaughter. She didn't see me at first, or pretended not to. I nodded to the usher. "I'm here for Grayson Reyes." He hesitated a moment too long, then pointed to the side aisle. "You can sit there." The pews were mostly filled with faces I recognized from a distance, old neighbors, family friends, people from the firm. My parents sat in the second row, Selena next to them, leaning in as my mother whispered something into her ear. I found a seat near the back. No one joined me. Someone behind me muttered, "Why is she here?" Another replied, "I thought she cut ties years ago." I didn't turn around. The murmurs passed over me like wind through trees, sharp but familiar. The urn sat at the front, small and dark, and nothing like the man I remembered. Next to it was a photograph of Grandpa from years ago, standing in front of the cabin in his work gloves, smiling like he wasn't supposed to. They played a hymn I didn't know. The pastor spoke of legacies and faith, but my eyes stayed fixed on the photograph. I thought of that quiet porch afternoon, the one no one knew about, the one that hadn't needed explaining. Grief is a strange thing. Selena walked in like she owned the place, her coat draped over her arm, a small clutch swinging from her wrist. "This is just formality," she said loud enough for me to hear. Grandpa knew who deserved what. Our parents settled beside her. My mother had the same tight-lipped look she wore at weddings and court hearings, equal parts pride and performance. I didn't sit near them. I took the chair closest to the window away from the cluster. Mr. Thorne entered with a file tucked beneath his arm. He greeted the room with a quiet nod before taking his seat. "Thank you all for coming. I'll begin with the official reading of Grayson Reyes's will, dated June 12th of last year." Selena crossed her legs and tilted her chin upward like she already knew what came next. "To my granddaughter, Selena Reyes." Mr. Thorne read, "I leave the Aspen Chalet, all furnishings therein, and the sum of $300,000 to be disbursed within 60 days of probate." Selena's smile widened, but not from surprise. She glanced at my parents, who each gave her the kind of small nod reserved for people fulfilling expectations. Mr. Thorne paused to turn the page. There was a subtle shift in the air, almost imperceptible, like the room exhaled and held its breath all at once. Selena turned toward me slightly, her smirk still soft around the edges. My mother didn't look at me at all. No one said anything, but it was clear what they believed that was the end. My name wouldn't be called. I had been acknowledged by invitation only just enough to stay on the right side of legal courtesy. I folded my hands in my lap and waited. Mr. Thorne cleared his throat again. "And now," he said to Irina Reyes. The words settled on the table like dust, soft but undeniable. My pulse jumped, but I didn't move. He adjusted his glasses and continued reading, and just like that, the air in the room began to change. "Mr. Thorne's voice was steady, almost too steady. "To my granddaughter, Irina Reyes," he said, "I leave controlling interest in Reyes Development along with $53.5 million in personal and investment assets." The words didn't land right away. They hung in the air, suspended, waiting for someone to claim them as real. The silence in the room stretched thin. Selena blinked. Once, then again. What she said, like she hadn't heard correctly. My mother made a small choking sound. My father sat back as if something heavy had just slammed into his chest. No one looked at me. Mr. Thorne kept reading unshaken. This includes 62% ownership of all corporate entities' voting authority on the board of directors and full discretion regarding future leadership and asset allocation. Selena stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the wood. There has to be some mistake. There's no mistake, Mr. Thorne said calmly. Your grandfather made these updates in person, witnessed and notarized. He was of entirely sound mind. My hands were still folded. I hadn't moved. My heart was thudding against my ribs like it was trying to outrun what I'd just heard. He never said anything, Selena snapped. He never even liked her. He barely mentioned her. Mr. Thorne closed the file gently. He left a brief addendum for the family to hear. He looked down and read one final sentence this time, without legal cadence, only quiet intention. She was the only one who showed up without a camera. The room fell silent again, but this time the silence was heavier, pressed down with the weight of something none of them had expected clarity. Selena looked stunned, no fury, yet just disbelief. My mother's mouth had dropped slightly open, her expression caught somewhere between denial and insult. My father looked at me, really looked at me for the first time in years. His gaze didn't soften. It just held. I wasn't thinking about the money. Not the company, not even the power. I was thinking about Grandpa's porch and that old book and the way he never rushed my silence. I was thinking about the Sunday I never shared with anyone because I hadn't needed to. Selena finally spoke again. This isn't fair. I looked at her calm level. It wasn't meant to be. Mr. Thorne stood gathering the documents. There is one more item Grayson requested I share. A personal letter. It's addressed to you, Irina. He handed me a sealed envelope, the handwriting instantly familiar. I slid it into my coat pocket, unsure if I was ready to open it. But I knew I would. Just not in front of them. I waited until I was alone. Not just away from the office, but back in the small motel room I'd checked into the night before, where the heater rattled and the curtains didn't quite meet in the middle. I sat on the edge of the bed with the envelope in my lap, turning it over twice. His handwriting was steady. I traced the capital I in my name before finally breaking the seal. Inside were 3 folded pages. No date, no dear. Just my name followed by his words. Irina. You never asked for anything, but you gave me something none of them could time without agenda. I watched you grow up in the quiet corners of a house too loud to hear you. They measured love in applause. You measured it in presence. That Sunday you came no speech, no performance, you just brought tea and sat with me. No one else knew, and you never told them. That told me everything. I paused, breath-catching. The air in the room felt thinner somehow, as if he were there again, just watching, not expecting anything back. I changed my will the next week, not out of spite. I love Selena too in my way, but she never stayed unless there was a lens pointed at her. She memorized every part of my legacy except the part that mattered the time it took to build it. You asked me once why I kept all those maps and journals. You didn't laugh when I said I liked knowing where things had been, so I could better guess where they might be going. I smiled without meaning to. He had said that. I remember thinking how strange it was that someone so practical still believed in direction without guarantees. I don't care what you do with the company. Keep it, sell it, change its name. What I'm leaving you isn't concrete. It's trust. Trust that someone who shows up quietly without needing to be seen is exactly the kind of person who should be holding the light when everyone else forgets where the switch is. The last sentence was written more slowly, the loops wider, the lines slightly tilted. They'll tell you that you don't deserve it, but I've seen what the world rewards, and I've seen what it forgets. I'm choosing to remember you. Love, Grandpa. I folded the letter carefully, pressing the crease with the side of my hand. Then I placed it back in the envelope and slid it under my pillow. It wasn't validation I felt. It was recognition, soft and firm, like the ground under your feet after you thought you'd been walking on glass. I returned to the office the next morning for the final paperwork. Mr. Thorne had asked me to come alone. When I stepped through the door, they were already there, my parents and Selena seated stiffly in the waiting area, like they were posing for a portrait they hadn't agreed to. Selena stood as soon as she saw me. "You manipulated him." She said each word sharp and controlled, like she'd rehearsed it in the mirror. "He was old. He didn't know what he was doing." I didn't answer right away. I just looked at her, really looked at her makeup, flawless blouse, pressed grief, ironed into outrage. I didn't need to prove anything I said. I just loved him. Her face twisted. "Don't you dare make this about love." "He was my grandfather, too." I nodded. "Then you must have known he didn't care for cameras." My mother flinched. My father looked at the ground. Mr. Thorne stepped into the doorway, his voice steady. "Mr. Reyes underwent 2 independent mental evaluations before he amended his will. Both confirmed full competency. His instructions were deliberate and detailed." "That doesn't mean it's right," Selena snapped. "No," I said. "It just means it was his choice." My mother broke then. Not loudly, not all at once, but the tears started and she turned her face away from all of us. My father put a hand on her shoulder, but she didn't reach for it. Selena gathered her things with clipped movements. "This isn't over," she said, but her voice had lost its center. "You don't get to rewrite the family just because he's gone." I didn't answer. There was nothing else I needed to say. She walked out, heels echoing sharply down the hall. Mr. Thorne gave me a soft nod, gesturing toward the office. Just a few signatures. I followed him inside the envelope still tucked against my chest. I hadn't let go of it since last night. Whatever storm had passed, I was still here. Not untouched, but unshaken. The drive to the cabin took just under 2 hours. Snow flurried along the shoulders of the road, the kind that never quite stuck, but whispered that winter was waiting. I hadn't been here in over a decade, but the turns came back to me like muscle memory. The tall evergreens, the sag in the old mailbox, the gravel that popped under the tires as I pulled up the narrow drive. The key turned without resistance. Inside, everything was as he'd left it. The pine table, the faded armchair with the threadbare blanket, the row of books along the shelf that always leaned slightly left. Dust had settled, but nothing had changed. On the mantel above the cold hearth stood a single photograph. I stopped when I saw it. Me, age 10, legs crossed on the porch step, reading with my back against Grandpa's knee. His hand rested on my shoulder, and we were both looking down at the same page. I didn't even know the picture existed. Beside it sat a small leather-bound journal. I picked it up carefully and flipped open the first page. His handwriting was slightly angled, deliberate. Irina was never loud. That's how I knew I could trust her. The breath left me like I'd been holding it for years. I sat in the armchair, the journal in my lap, and let the silence fill the room, not heavy but whole. After a while, I stood, added a few logs to the fireplace, and struck a match. The first flame caught, then spread slow and sure. I watched it take shape, listened to the wood settle, and for the first time in longer than I could measure, I didn't feel like I had to explain anything to anyone. The room warmed, the edges softened. I stayed there for a long time until the light glowed steady across the floor, and I could feel the weight of the letter, the photograph and everything I'd inherited, not as a burden, but as a beginning.